Okay, so we can begin with 3 times paying homage to the Buddha. You have the recorder going. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we've been studying now the Ānāpānasati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing. And last time we finished going through the 16 phases or 16 aspects of mindfulness of breathing. And now with the next section, the Buddha will show how mindfulness of breathing fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you remember, if you go back a page to 943, paragraph 15, when the Buddha introduces mindfulness of breathing, he says that first, mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated is of great fruit and great benefit. Then, that's the first statement. Then the second statement, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then the third assertion is that when the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed, they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. So we have 1, 2, 3. Then the fourth assertion is that when the 7 enlightenment factors are developed and cultivated, they fulfill true knowledge and deliverance or liberation. So if we want to show this schematically, we can. You got it in the camera?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're coming to the second step, how mindfulness of breathing fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And with this, you'll see that the Buddha takes the 16 steps or phases or aspects of mindfulness of breathing, and then he quite explicitly breaks them into 4 tetrads, 4 groups of 4, and each tetrad is assigned to one of the 4 Satipaṭṭhānas, one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Okay, so the first tetrad, from breathing in long, breathing out long, breathing in short, breathing out short, breathing in short, breathing out short, experiencing the whole body when breathing in and out, tranquilizing the bodily formation when breathing in and out. So when one is practicing in that way, then the Buddha says on that occasion, one abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Okay, now comes the interesting explanation. Then the Buddha goes on to say, I say that this is a certain body among the bodies, namely in-breathing and out-breathing. So that is why when the bhikkhu abides, so that is why on this occasion the bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. So this is taken as the justification by the commentaries for the statement in the earlier part of the sutta that when it said that sabbakaya patisangvedi asasati pasatiti sikati, that is, he trains thus, I shall breathe in experiencing the whole body, I shall breathe out experiencing the whole body. So it's on the basis of this statement that the commentary says the whole body here should be taken to mean the entire in-breath, the entire out-breath. Though in the earlier class, as I said, I don't really think that's the original, the intention of the original statement. But here, the way I would understand this statement, that this is a certain body among the bodies, namely in-breathing and out-breathing, is simply in the sense that in and out breathing is a bodily process or something that pertains to the body. And so when one is observing the actual physical act of breathing in and breathing out, then one is simply one is contemplating the body on that occasion. I don't think it's really necessary to take the fact that in and out breathing is called a certain kind of body and then superimpose that statement on the idea of experiencing the whole body while breathing in and out and say, this means being fully aware of the entire in-breath, the entire out-breath. But of course, different people can have different interpretations. I don't want to say that one has to reject the traditional interpretation, because either one will work. The important thing is to be consistently, continuously, and consistently aware of the whole in-breath and the whole out-breath. And then as one does that, I think it will just be an inevitable part of experience that one's awareness comes to encompass the whole body, even though one is focusing on the in-breath and out-breath. Okay, so here we see how the first tetrad fits into contemplation of the body as a foundation of mindfulness. Okay, the second, now we come to the second tetrad. This is in passage number 25. So here the Buddha says, on whatever occasion the monk trains thus, I shall breathe in experiencing rapture, I shall breathe out experiencing rapture, I shall breathe in experiencing sukha, that's pleasure or bliss. I shall breathe out experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe in experiencing the mental formation, out, same. I shall breathe in, shall breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. On that occasion, the monk dwells contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, or clearly comprehending and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Okay, now as an explanation, again, this is a little bit strange. The text says, or in the text the Buddha says, I say that this is a certain feeling among the feelings, namely giving close attention to in-breathing and out-breathing. That is why, on this occasion, the monk abides contemplating feelings as feelings. Okay, now the word here, which is the term that represents close attention. Let's see if we have the Pali term in the note. Yeah, it's sadhuka manasikāra. So the key word here is manasikāra. Now, there are other passages, a fair number of passages in the suttas, in which manasikāra, attention, is distinct from feeling. For example, I think we find this in Sutta number 9. This is on page 141, where Venerable Sariputta is explaining Namarupa, mentality, materiality. This is section number 54. So he raises the question, like, what is mentality and materiality? And then to explain mentality, nama, he says feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention. These are called mentality. So here there's a distinction between feeling and attention. And if you think, so this is Sariputta speaking, contradicting the Buddha, but actually Sariputta here is just pretty much repeating what the Buddha himself has shown, the way in which the Buddha himself explains nama, or mentality, in other suttas. For example, in the Nidana Samyutta, the collection of sayings on dependent origination, in the Samyutta Nikaya. So this is not something, original to Sariputta. And then in Sutta number 111, again, this is spoken by Sariputta. This is where he's analyzing the mental factors present in each of the jhanas. And then he distinguishes what is present there. For example, page 899, passage number 4, section number 4. So among the factors present there is contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind. Then comes zeal, desire, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. And so attention is not the same as feeling. And so for this reason, if you look at note 123, 1123, the commentary sort of gives an explanation of this. It explains that close attention sadhuka manasikāra is not itself actually feeling, but it is spoken of as such only figuratively. And what is actually the feeling in this set of 4 items, the item that directly, explicitly, and clearly belongs in the Vedana Khandha, in the aggregate of feelings, is what is here translated as pleasure. This is sukha, pleasure, bliss, happiness. This is pleasant feeling. So there are the 3 kinds of feelings: painful feeling, that's not explicitly mentioned here; neutral feeling, which is not explicitly mentioned, but there's pleasant feeling. And pleasant feeling is mentioned here as sukha patisangvedi, experiencing pleasure. But when there's pleasure, it's often preceded and accompanied by rapture, piti, or joy. And so joy comes into this tetrad, and then the mental formation we saw elsewhere. For example, Sutta number 44, that the mental formation is defined or identified with perception and feeling. So one aspect of the mental formation is feeling. And so when one speaks about experiencing the mental formation, that could be taken to experience whatever kind of feeling arises, whether it's painful feeling, pleasant feeling, or neutral feeling. But generally, the painful feeling would be abandoned or overcome in the earlier stages of meditation. So, as the mind becomes concentrated, pleasant feeling will arise, and then as the mind becomes more deeply concentrated in absorption, the pleasant feeling will become first intensified, then it will fade out to be replaced by the peaceful, neutral feeling. Okay, so it seems that really, literally, and explicitly, what brings this tetrad into the contemplation of feelings is first the mention of experiencing pleasure, and then second, the mention of experiencing and tranquilizing the mental formation. Okay, now we come to section number 26. This is the third tetrad, which is going to be subsumed under the contemplation of mind as a foundation of mindfulness. And here it's pretty much quite explicit, because all of them mention the mind. So first, one breathes in and out, experiencing the mind, becoming clearly aware of the mind, not only knowing it, but really almost tangibly experiencing what is happening in the mind. Then one breathes in and out, suffusing the mind with gladness or joy. Then one breathes in and out, collecting the mind, concentrating it even more intensively on its object. And then one breathes in and out, liberating the mind, which I explained last time means it's not the final liberation of mind, not the ultimate liberation, but it means releasing the mind from successively more subtle, constricting factors. First, liberating the mind or releasing the mind from the five hindrances. Then, when one enters the first jhana, to move to the second, one releases the mind from vitakka and vichara, that is thinking and examination. Then one releases the mind from rapture. Then one releases the mind from the pleasant feeling to go into the peaceful, neutral feeling. Okay, so this tetrad clearly belongs to the contemplation of mind. And then the Buddha says, I do not say that there is the development of mindfulness of breathing for one who is forgetful, for one who is not fully aware. And here, by one who is forgetful, it's literally mutta sattisa, which means one who has lost mindfulness. So it's implying that in order to develop mindfulness of breathing, of course, one needs mindfulness. And then one who is not fully aware means one who lacks sampajanya, which I prefer now to translate clear comprehension. So in other words, to successfully practice mindfulness of breathing, the two essential mental factors that are needed are mindfulness, which is what keeps the breath present in the mind, which is responsible for keeping the breath in mind. That's the role of mindfulness. And then it's clear comprehension that enables one, when breathing in, to know I'm breathing in, when breathing out, to know I'm breathing out. So clear comprehension is what enables one to know what is happening with each occasion of experience. When one is experiencing the whole body, then one clearly comprehends that. When one is tranquilizing the bodily formation, then one knows that. That's through clear comprehension. And so knowing what is happening is the role of clear comprehension, and keeping the object in mind without losing track of it is the role of mindfulness. And so probably because those two, mindfulness and clear comprehension, are functions of the mind. In the Abhidhamma, of course, they'll be classified as mental factors, caitasikas. And so these four steps are said to pertain to contemplation of mind. Okay, now we come to the fourth tetrad, and this, as we explained last time, it seems that in the first three tetrads, the emphasis or the focus, of the two branches of meditation, serenity or concentration, and insight or wisdom, the first three tetrads pertain most prominently to the side of serenity or concentration, even though there are ways of using them to generate insight. But you could see from the wording, the expression about tranquilizing each of the factors, the body, the feelings, the mind, that the emphasis is on serenity, on samatha or samadhi. But with the fourth tetrad, where the word contemplating, anupassana, is used with each statement. Now the emphasis switches over to insight or to vipassana. And so we have contemplating impermanence while breathing in and out, or contemplating impermanence in the in-breaths and out-breaths, contemplating the fading away, that is the dissolution or disappearance of all of the bodily and mental factors with the in-breath and out-breath, then contemplating cessation, that is contemplating the actual disappearance or non-existence of each preceding event in the process of breathing in and out. And then contemplating relinquishment, that is the giving up of the defilements while breathing in and out. So in that particular set of 4 items, the Buddha says, on that occasion, the monk abides contemplating, here I don't actually like the translation, mind objects, but rather now I would use, it's dhammesu dhammanupassi in Pali. So it's contemplating, the word dhamma in the plural has so many different nuances or shades of meaning that there are different ways of reading the statement, but I would take it to be contemplating factors of experience. So he dwells contemplating factors of experience as factors of experience, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Okay, and then the Buddha gives the reason. He says, having seen with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief. In Pali, this is abhijja domanasang. Again, covetousness and grief. I don't quite like now. Abhijja, which is translated covetousness here, is like strong craving, or maybe just a synonym for craving. Strong desire. And then domanassa, it doesn't have to be as strong as grief, but it's any kind of sadness, displeasure, even a slight degree of dejection, or in colloquial English we would say any kind of down mood. So it's like covetousness and grief is meant any degree of either attachment or craving or any degree of mental displeasure. Oh yeah, you read my mind. Not quite, I was hoping for a nice oolong tea from China, from Taiwan, but I just have to live with my abhijja. Okay, yeah, that's better. Do you have enough light there? Because there's a middle column, I don't know which. Oh, I see, then those bulbs must have blown out. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, now this is a somewhat, to me, it's a bit of a puzzling explanation. I don't have the clear explanation for this, but maybe we have a hint here. having seen with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief, he closely looks on with equanimity. How do we connect this to, first, how do we connect the contemplation of impermanence, fading away, and so on, to contemplation of dhammas, mental factors of experience? And how do we connect contemplating factors of experience with seeing with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief? Any thoughts? Any ideas? And again, in this case, I don't have like the right idea in my mind and I'm testing, do they know? But it's just to see what ideas one might, oh, I didn't even, oh, Peter, yeah.
I've always assumed that when one contemplates impermanence and sees that as the core reality, that one naturally develops.
Take the.
One naturally develops dispassion because of the futility of trying to hang on or even be repelled by things.
Yeah, I mean that could be true, but what I'm trying to say is how that contemplation of impermanence fits into contemplating mind object or factors of experience as factors of experience.
Ah, right, yeah.
Donna in the back row.
Yeah, well, we see in meditation the phenomena arising and ceasing.
Yeah.
So we just discern the impermanence of it. It appears and disappears. So that's contemplation of the process that...
Okay, but what are the dhammas here then?
Well, that's the phenomena, dhammas.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a good way to explain it. Yeah. So, because the word dhamma can be used in the broadest sense to cover, like, when we speak of factors of experience, everything that comes into the range of experience. And so, like, one of the groups that's included in contemplation of dhammas is the 5 aggregates. So even though one starts off observing just the in and out breathing, which belongs to the form aggregate, but as the focus broadens, when one reaches the stage of insight, then one is taking in every aspect of experience. So one brings all 5 aggregates in. Anybody else have any ideas about this? Stephen, yeah.
Not so much a different idea because, again, giving up wanting and not wanting. I'm fascinated to know, though, how you see that that's not a sufficient explanation.
That was not a sufficient.
That when one has a deep understanding of impermanence or has a sense of equanimity, how that's not a sufficient explanation for you. I'd like to know how you work with that.
I didn't say that wasn't a sufficient explanation. I just asked whether anybody else has any ideas. I didn't say that it was insufficient. I just thought,
thank you.
You know, that one could look at it from, perhaps one could see it from a different perspective. Maybe Peter has another.
Well, I have one other idea, Bhante, which is when you think of the 4 tetrads in terms of the 4 foundations, and you think of the word Dhamma and all the nuances of meaning, one of which is simply the teaching of the Buddha.
Of
right?
Dhamma, I see.
In the first 3 you've got, as you said, the tranquilizing of the feelings, the body, the mind. In the 4th tetrad, it's almost as if this is the culmination, this is what one does, right? This is the, so it's, that to me brings to mind the idea of Dhamma simply as what we ordinarily think of it as, not mind object necessarily, or even phenomena, but just the core teaching of the Buddha.
Yeah, I think that's, that's interesting, and I think that's another way to look at it, that in the first three tetrads, of course, these are things taught by the Buddha, so in a general way they come under the Dhamma, but they're not yet, you might call the core Dhamma, the heart of the Dhamma, the unique or special, what pertains to the special realization of the Buddha, that particular, those teachings that are explicitly connected to the arising of wisdom. But here, with contemplating impermanence, fading out, cessation, relinquishment, now we come into contemplating things from the perspective of the teaching, from those teachings which bring the arising of wisdom. Yeah, so this is actually another way to look at it. And in fact, when we take, not from this sutta, but from the Satipaṭṭhāna sutta, when we take Dhammanupassana, what comes under Dhammanupassana? Anybody refresh my memory? What comes there?
Well, I mean, things like Four Noble Truths.
Wait, we have to get, I always insist people have to get things in the right sequence.
Oh. Oh, the five hindrances?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then next. After you get the first, I'll accept some degree of disorder. Anybody else?
The five aggregates.
What?
The asanas, the floods, the four asanas.
No, they're not in there, yeah.
The five aggregates.
7 factors of awakening.
Wait first.
The five aggregates.
Okay, the five aggregates.
And what he said, 7 factors of enlightenment.
7 factors of enlightenment.
The sixfold base comes before that.
Yeah, the 6 internal and external sense bases come right after the aggregates. Then the 7 factors of enlightenment. Then comes the Four Noble Truths. And so we could say that all of these things, 5 hindrances, 5 aggregates, 6 sense bases, 7 factors of enlightenment, 4 noble truths, all of these things we could say are factors of experience, but it's not just, they're not just laid out as a kind of random catalog of items and experience, but they're organized from a particular perspective, particular point of view. And that is the perspective or point of view of the Dhamma, of the Buddha's teachings. And so we're progressing here from the 5 hindrances as things to be overcome, to be abandoned. Then we come to 2 alternative schemes for contemplating the actual nature of experience, either by way of the 5 aggregates or by way of the 6 inner and outer sense bases. Then as the contemplation of aggregates or sense bases becomes firm and steady, then the contemplation gives rise to the 7 factors of enlightenment. And then when the 7 factors of enlightenment all come together at a level of sufficient maturity, then they bring the realization or penetration of the Dhamma in the sense of the critical teaching, which is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so now let us try to see, we have 2 statements here. So the first is, on that occasion, the monk abides contemplating dhammas as dhammas. And then we have, having seen with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief, He closely looks on with equanimity. This is a bit subtle, but I'll just throw my fishing hook out into the water. Excuse the simile. It's perfectly non-lethal. And just ask if anybody can relate that to contemplation of Dhammas. Okay, I said this was a bit subtle, so I'll give my own interpretation. This is the way I understand it. It's not based on any commentary. Okay, so we have first putting away covetousness, that's abhijja, and grief, I don't like grief, dejection or displeasure. Yeah, we can take these. Okay, now it seems possible to connect or to correlate abhijja, its craving or desire, with the first of the five hindrances, which is sensual desire. And in fact, in some passages on the abandoning of the five hindrances, we find that the overcoming of the first hindrance is explained not as the overcoming of sensual desire, but as the overcoming of abhijja. This is the case in the standard passage on eliminating the five hindrances. For example, if we go to page 366, this is from Sutta number 39. And then we go to paragraph or section number 13. So it's explaining, okay, the monk, after going to a secluded place, he sits down, crosses his legs, and sets up mindfulness before him. Then it says, abandoning covetousness for the world, that is abhijja. He abides with a mind free from covetousness. Okay, but then as you read on, you see that he abandons ill will, he abandons sloth and torpor, he abandons restlessness and remorse, and he abandons doubt. So here, clearly, we have the five hindrances, but the first hindrance is not called kama chanda, sensual desire, but rather it's called abhijja. So when we come to the Ānāpānasati Sutta, we could see that there's a connection between abhijja, that covetousness, and the first of the hindrances. Okay, now the second term is that we find here is domanassa, which is normally understood as a feeling of displeasure, a feeling of dislike or sadness. But that kind of feeling is usually or associated with what kind of response to things, what kind of mood of mind. Who said that? Yeah, aversion, or in terms of what we usually use for the hindrances. Okay, ill will. Yeah. So aversion, ill will. So they're not exactly the same, but there's a correlation between them. So we have here the abandoning or overcoming, having, let me see. So he sees with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief. So this implies overcoming the 5 hindrances, which the 5 hindrances are the first group under contemplation of Dhammas. Okay, and then it continues, having seen with wisdom the abandoning of covetousness and grief, he closely looks on with equanimity. Let me just see if we have the Pali here. No, but I think it's sadhukang ajupekati. But the key word here, if we turn the verb into the noun, is upeka, equanimity. Now, where does equanimity belong? Where do we meet equanimity elsewhere?
It's one of the divine abodes, and it's also one of the 7 factors.
Yeah, okay. Here we're not concerned with the divine abodes, in which upeka is more like impartiality. But you said the 7 factors of enlightenment? Yeah. So upeka is the last of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And do the 7 factors of enlightenment have any place in the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Where do they belong?
Number 4?
Yeah, they belong to the 4th foundation of mindfulness. So here we have the first, by overcoming desire, or abhijja and domanassa, desire and displeasure, we could see the reference to the overcoming of the 5 hindrances, the first set within the contemplation of Dhammas, and then by contemplating that abandoning or looking upon it with equanimity, we see an allusion to the 7 factors of enlightenment, which also belong to the contemplation of Dhammas. So we have the first set and the 4th set. And of course, there's not going to be mention of the 4 Noble Truths because that doesn't fit in neatly here. But overcoming the barriers and then bringing to maturity the positive factors, which are the 7 factors of enlightenment. Okay, so that now takes care of the connection between the 16 phases of mindfulness of breathing and the 4 foundations of mindfulness.